me hace tremenda ilusión presentar a nuestro siguiente ponente. Bueno, primero quizá me presento yo. Yo soy Blanca del Noval, líder de una iniciativa que se llama Basque Culinary Lab, en la cual llevamos tiempo trabajando sobre la regularización de plantas silvestres, ¿no? como recurso natural y también por su valor gastronómico. ¿Y por qué me hace tremenda ilusión presentar a nuestro próximo ponente? Es porque para nosotros, y supongo que para todos los chefs que de alguna manera hemos sido frikis en el tema de plantas silvestres con valor gastronómico, para nosotros ha sido un referente, su libro una Biblia y su trayectoria ha sido una fuente de inspiración. Bueno, sin más, no quiero restarle más tiempo a nuestro ponente, Miles. Hi Miles, it's nice to have you here again, this time quite far, but at the same time,
hello.
Thanks again for being here.
So I'm not sure. Okay. What should I be seeing on the screen? I'm not sure. Okay. All I'm seeing is the title page. Okay, that's a bit disconcerting, but I'll just talk to the title page. Okay. So I guess what I want to talk about really is, it is kind of wildlife and its culture. Just what is wildlife like? What is the culture of wildlife, or the culture of biodiversity and the biosphere? Because I think that actually we don't even need to talk about wildlife, because I spent a lot of time thinking about what does wild mean, and actually I can't really see a distinction between wildness and life. When I look at the quality of what life is, what it means for something to be alive, and then I look at wildness, it seems to me that it's the same thing. What you have is this beautiful dance of many, many things. They're sort of intricately interwoven. They're responding to one another. So there's all these shifts and moves and exchanges happening between so many different diverse elements that creates a whole fabric that then sustains every part and every element within that fabric. Every thread, you might say, is building a support system that undergirds itself. That's life and that's wildlife. So when we talk about biodiversity, we're I mean, I know there's a section of the topic called biodiversity, which is looking at the crops that have been bred and the varieties of crops. But in the main, when we're talking about biodiversity, we are talking about wild species which have evolved within this complex fabric of life over millions, if not billions of years. And so I think when we're looking at like where things have gone wrong and how we could make things better, my reference point is 100% wildlife and its culture, as it were. The culture, I guess, being all of this intricately woven fabric that sustains everything. So what I guess we'd want to look at is how does that intricately woven fabric get woven? You know, how do many, many, many very diverse and wonderful things get linked up together to create this fabric that keeps the whole thing, sustains it, holds it. But I guess the word, we're talking about the word sustainable. It's a good word to use. That we sustain things, we enable things that are alive to continue to live. And to allow the whole living system to continue to support and undergird each and every species. And so as we're looking at our food system and really as our way of life here in the 21st century for many people in many parts of the world, we're looking at a way of life which is increasingly looking less like what I've just described. Okay, so I've got this statement that I think probably sums up everything that I'm wanting to say, really, which is that life is sustained by immediate contact. So, all of these linkages that we're maybe going to consider, if you look at an ecosystem, a living system of any sort, if you look at your body, the way that your body is sustained is by each cell each membrane within your body is in vital contact with either ones immediately next to it, or there's transport and communication systems like nerves and your blood flowing through your body that's linking you to every other part in a very immediate way. And so the problem is that when we look at the modern situation we find ourselves in as human beings, what we have is something that is dominated by another system. It's not a living system. And therefore it doesn't have this immediate contact. We're looking at industry and consumerism, which actually function by a kind of a mediation that removes any kind of immediate contact. Now, it's very interesting to hear the talk by the chap now. You have to forgive me because I've forgotten his name, but the chap from the International Trade Organization, because he was talking about remote links, as it were, between communities producing food and consumers. But it seemed to me that what he was describing there was a way of creating an immediate contact between something that is so remote, like the guys producing the nutmegs, having a way to communicate their story through people that are actually consuming or using them in a restaurant, able to tell the story to their guests and so on. So there is this scope with kind of global trade of things coming from elsewhere, where we can work at making this immediate contact to make this like a living system. But what is happening by far the majority of the time with almost everything we consume these days, and especially within the food system, is that immediate contact is almost entirely severed, and what we have is a very strange situation. And I'm going to try to illustrate that situation through a particular kind of human relationship in a minute. But I guess the point is that if we see that we have ourselves removed from immediate contact by the way that we relate, i.e. by the food that we eat coming from somewhere else, and coming in ways that don't allow us to have any direct, relationship with where it comes from. I mean, it starts with the fact that it doesn't come from here, right? That's the removal of immediate contact first and foremost. But even then, it's coming from faceless, commodified situations, manufacturing and import-export that gives us no insight into the actual story of where this food that we're putting in our mouths originates. So the point is we need to try and restore that contact if we're going to look at sustainability, if we're going to look at our food system becoming a living system. Because I guess what I need to characterize really was when I say life is sustained by immediate contact, industry and consumerism is cutting off that contact by putting all these layers of mediation in between, all these barriers, like the plastic bag that we buy things in is a very good illustration of that. It's putting a barrier, an impenetrable barrier between us and the thing. That we could say is actually characterized as like a machine. So we've got this organism, this organic system, the biosphere, the living systems, the ecosystems that surround us. And then we've got this mechanism, this machine of industrial consumer capitalism. And the point is, our global food system, we have to ask ourselves, is this an organism? Is this an organic system? Is it a living system that's characterized by the characteristics of a living system? Or is it a machine, a mechanism? And I think we can see that clearly in the vast majority of cases. With most of what we consume, we are looking at a machine. We're looking at a mechanism. And that is okay. So what we need to do is restore the contact that has been lost and create a food system that is organic. But in the meantime, I think it's really important to notice that what this mechanism has done, this global industrial machine that is currently producing our food. Okay, so whereas the living system being sustained by immediate contact is basically forging these links, it's forging these little fibers that make the fabric of life. And you could say forging bonds, okay? It's forging bonds like the kind of emotional bonds that we have with other people, with our children and so on. those bonds are forged between species and other species, between species and landscape, between people and landscape, between people and other species. And these linkages are the linkages that sustain and support life. So they carry us all, Well, when we start looking at machines, what we're looking at is simplifying. We're looking at homogenifying. We're looking at looking for the big yields. We're looking for sort of amassing large storehouses of one thing in one place, instead of what happens in a living system where very intricate little things like blood capillaries or root hairs or the little villi in our gut, the little what are they called? But anyway, the things inside our lungs, the tiny little tubes in our lungs that communicate these little life-sustaining exchanges of food or oxygen or whatever. So the intricately woven pattern of life is totally undermined by these machine systems, which are basically cutting away at the threads. It's like they're snipping away at the net, the fabric, the nest that sustains us. So what we need, obviously, is to get back in touch. We need to restore this living contact. And I guess what I'm going to try and get to in a fairly short space of time is how just learning to recognize and use and forming the habit. I love what Matt said earlier about habits and awareness being so key. So, if we can become aware of the wild plants, for example, that are living and growing very near to where we live. So wherever you are now, I just want you to consider you are somewhere, and that place is a place we might call here. You're in a different here from me, but we're all here, if you see what I mean. And near here, your here and my here, there are plants growing right now. Just want you to consider that, whether you're in the middle of some metropolis or right out in some rural location that's got good enough internet to tune into this now. There are plants within inches, feet, let's centimeters, meters, very, very near you. There are plants that you could eat. I just want you to consider that if you didn't already have that as a thought in your mind. And so if you become aware of that, and then you gain the knowledge to recognize and form habits to gather and eat, then this is a situation in which you are restoring an incredible kind of immediate contact with the living systems around you. Because what I want to say is, if you are any other species, there's something very important to note about where your food comes from. And I like to ask this question I'm going to ask now to kids. Like talking to kids about foraging. I have a little gang of kids and we're outside somewhere, and I ask them, where does your food come from? And some of them will, they never get the answer right, actually. I have to tell you in advance. Nobody ever gives me the answer that I'm actually looking for. Some of them say, from the shop, and others say from the farm. And then others, really smart ones, they say, from the land and the sea. And they think that they must have the answer right. But I said, no, you're all wrong. None of those answers are right. What I want to tell you is that food comes from here. It comes from here. Well, I've just spent several minutes discussing the fact that a lot of our food definitely doesn't come from here. But you see, what I'm talking about is what's normal. What is normal if you are a living organism, if you are a species, any other species but a human being, a Homo sapiens that's caught up in the industrial consumer culture that we're in now, any other species at all, and any other human other than the modern ones that are caught up in this industrial consumer system, any other species then, apart from this very small minority, the modern human, obtains all of its food from here, from this place here, the place where your body is located. That's where you get your food from. And so we see then it's such an aberration that so many humans are not getting our food from here. We're getting our food from a place called there, somewhere else. And therefore, there's this tremendous barrier between us and where our food comes from, just sheer in terms of distance. Let's see if we can repair that breach and be better informed about where our food comes from when it does come from somewhere else. But look, if we can start getting some of our actual food actually from this actual here, this place where you live, this place where you move around in the course of your daily activities. So I just want to just touch on a few things about what does vital or rather immediate contact mean? You know, what does it mean to have, and what are the means by which we have this vital contact? Well, I've already touched on a couple of them. I was talking about, you know, the fine tubules in your lungs and these little bits that absorb the food into your blood system, into your capillaries in your gut. These are points of contact, okay? And I just want to say that everything I'm saying can be illustrated through a simple little diagram here. Okay, if you can see that. So we've got skin, okay? And then we've got, on the outside of skin, we've got a place called out, and on the inside of skin, we've got a place called in. Now just think about your body for a moment. So here's a funny thing that somebody pointed out to me a while back. Your skin, if you just follow my skin for a moment, okay, I'm on the outside of me, and then I'll just go inside a little bit, and then, I mean, we're not going to follow this very far, obviously, but in there, my skin carries on to the back of my mouth, down into my throat, into my gut, and sooner or later, at the other end, it reemerges. But there's this tube going right through inside me and inside you, and it's infolded. But it's skin that's on the inside, and the same is with your lungs. The same is actually with your ears. You've got eardrums, and on the inside of your eyes, you've got a point of contact called your retina. So these examples with your gut and your lungs, this is a point of contact where you have immediate contact with something. In the case of your lungs, you're breathing in air that comes from here. This is something that we cannot be alienated from. We cannot remove that contact, even though if you're in the city, that's probably not such a good thing. You'd rather be breathing air from somewhere else. But the food that comes into our guts is then digested and has like dissolved particles in the liquid that is then absorbed into your blood capillaries. Well, that is so similar to earlier or other kinds of species. So a plant in the ground has roots and then root hairs, and then all the food and liquid is coming in through those root hairs, which have immediate contact with their surroundings. So we're one step removed because we take the stuff in from our surroundings, and then it comes in through our skin. It comes in through our gut, you know. But the difference is, obviously, we've moved out of this situation where we're just putting things in our mouths that come from here. We're putting things in our mouths that come from somewhere else. But look what happens. If I take that thing, say I go outside right now and I get a dandelion or some other plant, I put it in my mouth, I digest it. Look, what's outside, just outside, I mean, I could point outside the door here and see dandelions growing everywhere. And I put them inside my mouth and they digest inside my gut, and the molecules move across the barrier, the skin inside my gut, and into the blood capillaries and move out into parts of my body, and they start building the fabric of my body. So what was outside comes in, and it actually means I've become part of this landscape. So that kind of immediate contact is obvious in terms of eating. But the thing is, the immediate contact in terms of awareness is that we start to see things. It touches the skin at the back of our eyes, you know, that we see what is around us, and we come to kind of notice that. And we work these things into our bodies by eating them. But we work these things into our culture when we do that together. You know, so if more than one person goes out and gathers and eats wild food. So what I want to just try and wrap this up by saying is, like, there's been so much happened around gastronomy with wild foods, and restaurants putting this on the map and making it available to people as, like, this is something like the other person, Chido, said about giving dignity and value to what's locally available. These wild plants being like exalted really to an elevated position, saying this has value, you know. But you see, what we need to have now is, because like the restaurant table is not the center of the global food system. Manufacturers of food are not the center of the global food system. What is the center of our global food system is your table, your kitchen table, your home. So what I want to suggest is like, let's take all of this wonderful knowledge of gastronomy, but let's now empower ourselves to make meals and food that comes from our immediate surroundings, so that we can restore this immediate contact by eating the wild foods that we have right here.
Thank you so much, Miles. Your talk was amazing, and as always, you led us into your brain, even your body, and you mix our head, and it's always an amazing experience. I hope that everyone keeps the ideas that you just share, and thank you, really. It has been really, really special, your talk.